Yo, what is up guys, and welcome to another Honkai Star Rail video. So last time I went over and reviewed the physical variant of the Trailblazer, and in today's video I will be covering their fire variant, which in my opinion is the stronger of the two, that provides better team support and survivability. The Fire Trailblazer is by far one of the strongest free-to-play options available, and everyone should consider investing into this amazing defensive support. Everyone has access to the Fire Trailblazer once they have completed the Belobog main story quests. And from here on out, the Fire Trailblazer will serve as your main defensive support that protects your team with shields and taunts. After swapping paths on the Trailblazer, they will retain their levels, but their traces and eidolons will be reset, so you will have to reinvest into them. In this review video, I will be covering the Fire Trailblazer's skills, major traces, eidolons, their pros and cons, builds, and team compositions. Hopefully, by the end of this video, you all will have the needed information to help you better understand how to play and build the Fire Trailblazer. Alright, let's begin. Alright, let's get into his skills, starting off with the basic attack, which actually has two variants, a regular basic attack and an enhanced basic attack. For his regular basic attack deals fire damage equal to a percentage of the Trailblazer's attack to a single enemy and gains 1 stack of Magma Will. I will go over his Magma Will stacks in further detail once we get to the Fire Trailblazer's talent. For their enhanced basic attack, it is a blast-shaped attack, which means it will hit the main target as well as the 2 enemies adjacent to the main target. And this enhanced basic attack will consume 4 stacks of Magma Will to enhance the basic attack, dealing fire damage equal to a percentage of the Trailblazer's attack to a single enemy, and fire damage equal to a percentage of the Trailblazer's attack to enemies adjacent to it. Alright, moving on to the Fire Trailblazer's skill. It increases the Trailblazer's damage reduction by a certain percentage and gains 1 stack of Magma Will, with a 100% base chance to taunt all enemies for 1 turn. This skill will be used in certain situations, mostly against strong single target attacks or in AoE situations when you have the first major trace fully unlocked, which I will go into further detail later. A very useful skill that will certainly be helpful in your team's survival, especially in the later stages of Memory of Chaos. Okay, on to the Fire Trailblazer's ultimate. It will deal fire damage equal to a percentage of the Trailblazer's attack, plus a percentage of the Trailblazer's defense to all enemies. The next basic attack will be automatically enhanced and does not cost Magma Will. It has a moderate energy cost of 120. However, their ultimate will be up more often because the fire main character will be the character that's hit more often than not. And when you use their skill to taunt multiple enemies, the ultimate will almost instantly be recharged within a few turns. Overall, a very strong ultimate that provides great damage and even break potential. Alright, now let's go over their talent. Each time the Trailblazer is hit, they gain 1 stack of Magma Will for a max of 8 stacks. When Magma Will has no fewer than 4 stacks, the Trailblazer's basic attack becomes enhanced, dealing damage to a single enemy and enemies adjacent to it. When the Trailblazer uses basic attack, skill, or ultimate, apply a shield to all allies that absorbs damage equal to a percentage of the Trailblazer's defense plus a flat amount. The shield lasts for 2 turns. The shield provided by the Fire Trailblazer will be really weak and barely noticeable early on, but once you put some investment into the Fire Trailblazer's traces and relics, you will start to notice the difference. The shields don't stack, so a good way to make use of the Fire Trailblazer's talent, for example, would be if you use a basic attack or skill to generate the initial shield, and you have your ultimate up. Instead, you can save your ultimate until the enemy attacks and breaks one or some of your allies' shields. Then, you can use your ultimate to reapply the shield. In my opinion, this part of the Fire Trailblazer's kit is what makes them such a strong and flexible character for most teams. And finally, for their technique. After using technique, at the start of the next battle, gains a shield that absorbs damage equal to 30% of the Trailblazer's defense, plus 384 for 1 turn. It's an okay technique. I only really use it when I have the extra technique points. It does have some major synergy with his 3rd major trace, which I will be covering shortly, but you won't be able to unlock it until Ascension level 6 anyways. Alright, now we move on to the Fire Trailblazer's traces. In terms of skill priority, I would prioritize the talent first, and then the ultimate, followed by the basic attack, and then last would be the skill. Alternatively, you can prioritize the ultimate first over the talent. That's what some people like to do, because the ultimate does do quite a bit of damage and it has great attack and defensive scaling. However, I personally prefer the talent just for the stronger team-wide shields. For the Fire Trailblazer's first major trace, the Strong Defend the Weak, after using the skill, the damage taken by all allies reduces by 15% for 1 turn. I really undervalued this major trace early on. It wasn't until I reached the later floors of Memory of Chaos where I realized the importance and power of this major trace. On top of that, since it's the first major trace you're able to unlock, the investments are actually really cheap. I can't show you what the investments are, but I believe it's like the green material here and only one of the weekly boss material. You actually do not need to invest any track of destinies for the first major trace. I highly recommend you all level up this major trace at some point. In fact, this major trace should be your first priority over the other 2 major traces. Alright, moving on to the second major trace, Unwavering Gallantry. Using Enhanced Basic Attack restores the Trailblazer's HP by 5% of their max HP. This major trace is third in priority. The self-heal is nice to have, especially if you are one of those players who lack a second healer. But the amount of healing is rather insignificant. And when your fire main character taunts and causes all focus fire on themselves, this minor self-heal won't make much of a difference. You're honestly better off investing your tracks of destiny, which are these things right here, on your damage dealers before you consider leveling up this major trace. And for the last major trace, action beats overthinking. When the Trailblazer is protected by a shield at the beginning of the turn, increases their attack by 15% and regenerates 5 energy until the action is over. This will be your second priority when it comes down to the Fire Trailblazer's major traces. As stated before, this major trace synergizes really well with the Fire Trailblazer's technique, since that large shield is unlikely to be broken by the time the Fire Trailblazer takes their first turn. This extra energy regeneration, although small, will help the Fire Trailblazer cast their ultimate more often, resulting in more damage, break potential, and shielding for your team. Overall, a solid major trace and worth the investment, although it does cost a lot of credits and trace material, so keep that in mind. Alright, now let's move on to the Fire Trailblazer's Edelons. Much like the physical Trailblazer's Edelons, the Fire Trailblazer's Edelons are also all completely free to obtain from the main story and region shop of the Shanzhou Luofu. However, we currently only have access up to Edelon 5 for the Fire Trailblazer. The last and final Edelon will most likely be unlocked after the completion of the second half of the Shanzhou Luofu main story quest. Overall, all of the Fire Trailblazer's Edelons are of great value and will improve their already useful support and defensive capabilities. For the Fire Trailblazer's Edelon 1, when the Fire Trailblazer uses their basic attack, additionally deals fire damage equal to 25% of the Trailblazer's defense. When the Trailblazer uses their enhanced basic attack, additionally deals fire damage equal to 50% of the Trailblazer's defense. This basically allows the Fire Trailblazer to deal even more damage while building defense for tanking. A great Edelon to start things off. For their Edelon 2, the shield applied to all allies from the Trailblazer's talent will block extra damage equal to 2% of the Trailblazer's defense, plus 27. This Edelon is what allows the Fire Trailblazer's shields to finally become relevant in absorbing damage. In my opinion, probably the Fire Trailblazer's most useful and important Edelon. For their Edelon 3, they just get 2 points in their skill and talent. The skill levels aren't very important. 1% reduced damage per level is pretty insignificant. However, the levels for the talent strengthen the team's shield, so that overall is of great value. For the 4th Edelon, at the start of the battle immediately gains 4 stacks of Magma Will. This basically allows the Fire Trailblazer to start the battle off with an enhanced basic attack, which allows for more damage and break potential. Pretty solid Edelon. For their 5th Edelon, they get 2 levels in their ultimate and 1 level in their basic attack. Nothing special here, just a lot more damage. Their ultimate has really good scaling for both attack and defense. And finally, for the Fire Trailblazer's Edelon 6, after the Trailblazer uses their enhanced basic attack or ultimate, their defense increases by 10%, stacks up 3 times. Essentially an extra 30% defense, which is awesome. More defense is always welcomed for the Fire Trailblazer. Unfortunately, this Edelon is not yet available. Alright, now I'm gonna go over the Fire Trailblazer's pros and cons. Starting off with the pros. For the first and most obvious pro, all their eidolons are free. Based on what I've gone over previously, you should have a good understanding of how much damage and utility the Fire Trailblazer's eidolons provide. Without their eidolons, the Fire Trailblazer is a decent defensive support option. However, with their eidolons, their defense supporting capabilities rival even that of Gepard's. For the next pro, they have an AoE taunt skill, which currently is unique only to the Fire Trailblazer. In my opinion, this taunt skill is the most unique feature of the Fire Trailblazer that allows them to stand out above the rest of the other preservation characters. When used properly, this skill can single-handedly determine your success or failure for that particular battle. When you unlock the Fire Trailblazer's first major trace, this skill becomes even more essential for your team's survival in endgame content. I for sure would not have made it to floor 9 in the last season of Memory of Chaos without the help of this skill. The next pro is that the Fire Trailblazer is a flexible pick, mostly due to the Fire Trailblazer's extreme defensive supporting capabilities and being a skill point positive character. They can be slotted into pretty much any team without much issue, except when you are up against enemies resistant to fire and burn. Next, the Fire Trailblazer provides solid damage, at least for a tank. The Fire Trailblazer has really good attack and defensive scaling, especially on their ultimate, which allows them to actually deal a considerable amount of damage for a tank when compared to the other available tanks, March 7th and Gepard. There are even damage variant builds that are available and viable, which I will be discussing later on when I cover the Fire Trailblazer's builds. On top of all that, the Fire Trailblazer also makes for a very powerful breaker. Their ultimate has amazing AoE break potential, and when paired with the frequent ability to cast their enhanced basic attack, the Fire Trailblazer becomes a very potent firebreaker in both single target and AoE situations. And finally, for their last pro, obviously they have very good defensive utility. The ability to provide shields for the entire team, an AoE life-saving taunt, as well as even a team-wide damage reduction buff, makes the Fire Trailblazer one of the strongest preservation options available for all players. I can definitely see them being used as a defensive staple for all teams for a very long time. Alright, now we're going to move on to the Fire Trailblazer's cons, which honestly there aren't many. Starting off with the first con, it's that the Fire Trailblazer is really slow. As mentioned before, the Fire Trailblazer has a base speed of 95, which is actually the 4th slowest character in the game as of now. Only Hook, Gepard, and Clara have the Fire Trailblazer beat when it comes to low base speed. This in turn forces the Fire Trailblazer to run speed main stat boots no matter what. And they will also need some speed substats in their relics. Otherwise, you'll end up in my situation, where I'm forced to plus 15 my boots in order to meet the minimum 120 speed threshold for certain relic sets. Yep, quite a bit of luck and investment is needed for you to have a properly built Fire Trailblazer. And for the last con, yeah that's right, I could only think of 2 cons for the Fire Trailblazer, that's how good of a character they are, is that their shields that they provide are relatively small. This is especially apparent early on in the game when your Fire Trailblazer's skill level and stats are low. Even with high defense and the 4-piece Knight of Purity Palace set, the shields provided by the Fire Trailblazer can easily be broken by strong single target damage. Yeah, when compared to March 7th and Gepard's shields, the Fire Trailblazer definitely falls a bit short, but at the very least, they don't have to use skill points or energy to generate their shield. So that's at least one thing they got going for them. Alright, now let's go over the Fire Trailblazer's build, starting off with the recommended relic sets. The first set I would recommend is a 4-piece Knight of the Purity Palace set, paired with a 2-piece Fleet of the Ageless set, or a 2-piece Belobog of the Architect set. For the main stats, on the body piece I recommend defense percent, for their feet I recommend speed, their planar spear I'd recommend defense percent, and finally, for their link rope, you can either go defense percent or energy regeneration rate, depending on whether you want a tankier Fire Trailblazer with stronger shields, or if you want to be able to cast their ultimate more frequently. For the substats, I recommend prioritizing speed into defense into HP, and then after that, effect resist or break effect. Alternatively, you can run a 4-piece Musketeer of the Wild Wheat set early on if you lack any decent Knight of the Purity Palace pieces. The main stats and substat priority are the same. For the second set, it's more of a damage variant, like I mentioned before, of the Fire Trailblazer. I would recommend the 4-piece Thief of Shooting Meteor set, paired with a 2-piece Talia Kingdom of Banditry set. Although good luck getting that speed for that secondary effect, you're going to need plus 15 5-star boots, along with at least 25 speed and substats. So yeah, a lot of investment and RNG involved. For the main stats, the body piece you want defense percent, for the feet you want speed, planar sphere you want defense percent, and finally for the link rope you want break effect percent because this is a break effect build. For the substats, you want to be prioritizing speed, break effect, defense percent, and HP percent. I definitely would not recommend this build path over the first one, but it is a viable and very fun way to play the Fire Trailblazer. Okay, next I'm going to go over the Fire Trailblazer's recommended light cones. For my first recommended light cone, I'd recommend Moment of Victory, which is generally the best in slot light cone for all the current preservation characters. They all greatly benefit from the large defense percent boost, as well as the increased chance to be attacked. Funny thing is, the Fire Trailblazer even benefits from the effect hit rate percent gained from this light cone. Because if you guys didn't know, the taunt on the Fire Trailblazer has a base chance, even though it's 100%, to taunt all enemies. If the enemies have high enough effect resist, they can actually resist that taunt, and it's happened multiple times to me before. So with the extra effect hit rate provided by this light cone, the Fire Trailblazer therefore will have a better chance of taunting all the enemies. Overall, an amazing light cone option for those lucky enough to have pulled it. And coming in at a close second is Day 1 of my new life. My personal favorite 4-star preservation light cone, and it is what I am currently running on my Fire Trailblazer. The defense percent scales the Fire Trailblazer's shield, and when paired with the damage resist provided to all allies, this makes for a very strong defensive combination. A solid light cone overall, and I would highly recommend investing into it. Alright, and for the next recommended light cone, I'd recommend Landau's Choice. Basically a weaker version of Moment of Victory, but it does provide some extra damage reduction, which is pretty nice. Especially in those sticky situations, where your Fire Trailblazer taunts and then becomes the main focus of multiple enemies. This extra damage reduction could be a real lifesaver. If you lack the former 2 light cones, this light cone is a pretty decent option that's worth investing into. And finally, for those of you who do not have any of the previously mentioned light cones, I would recommend Amber, which is a 3-star preservation light cone. It's really easy to superimpose to level 5 and it'll give you a ton of defense and even more defense when you reach low HP. So it's a good temporary option for some players. You don't have to fully invest into it, however. Just put enough investment and levels into it to the point where your Fire Trailblazer is able to survive. And please, don't buy and upgrade Texture of Memories from Herda Shop. Save your Herda Bonds for the other 2 light cones. Okay, now I'm going to go over some team compositions featuring the Fire Trailblazer. The Fire Trailblazer is such a flexible character that he or she can literally be slotted into any team as the tank or defensive support. The only times you wouldn't want to bring your Fire Trailblazer would be against enemies resistant to fire and burn damage. Otherwise, they are always a good or at least decent option. Many skill point hungry and fast teams that feature Zile, like this team composition right here, or Susheng might have better use for faster and more offensive supports like Bronya and Ting Young. But the Fire Trailblazer is still a viable option if you lack those characters. I can recall upon my floor 7 Memory of Chaos experience against those 2 Ice Golems, I would say my Fire Trailblazer was definitely the MVP and sole reason for clearing that stage. Without my Fire Trailblazer, there was absolutely no way I was going to survive those 2 Ice Golems. In fact, this is the lineup I used for that particular stage. I have the Fire Trailblazer as the main tank and defensive support, Bailu as my healer, Ting Young as the offensive support, and Zile as my main single target damage dealer. The Fire Trailblazer in this lineup can serve as a really good skill point generator, as well as a tank who can draw aggro against strong single target attacks, and even AoE attacks since I have the first major trace unlocked. Yeah, definitely really happy I put quite a bit of investment into my Fire Trailblazer, allowing me to clear floor 7 of Memory of Chaos. And for the next lineup, we have the Fire Trailblazer, Natasha who is your healer, Serval which is your AoE damage dealer, and then Danheng as your single target damage dealer. This is your standard free-to-play team. Serval right here can be interchangeable with Asta if you want to have an offensive support rather than an AoE damage dealer. I mean, Asta does do AoE damage with her skill anyways. And in this team composition, the Fire Trailblazer should function similar to the previous lineup as a tank and defensive support. And for the last team composition or lineup, we have the Fire Trailblazer as our tank and defensive support, March 7th as well as our second tank and defensive support and shielder, Serval as our AoE damage dealer, and Dan Heng as our single target damage dealer. This is a team comp you can run if you are one of those unfortunate people without a second healer as your second team. The first team, obviously, you have Natasha as your healer, but for this second team, since you don't have a healer, your only option is to run 2 tanks that can both provide shields and taunts for your entire team. In fact, with this team composition, you can even combo the Fire Trailblazer's taunt with March 7's shield on top of the Fire Trailblazer, so therefore the Fire Trailblazer will take all the damage while absorbing it with March 7's shield. Keep in mind though, that combo does cost quite a bit of skill points, so you only want to be using that in dire situations. Alright guys, well that's going to be it for this Honkai Star Rail character review video. If you have any questions about the Fire Trailblazer, or if you have anything to add, please let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, or join if you wish to support my channel even further. But other than that, I'll see you guys in the next Honkai Star Rail video. Peace!